It's just a touch past 5 o'clock Eastern time. It's week 8 of the 2022 NFL season, and the FTN Network has got you covered. Welcome to the FTN Bets NFL Betting Show. I'm your host, Tom Hannifan, of course, joined by the fabulous Taylor Mathis and a man that we've all dubbed as of late, Mr. He Don't Miss, Kyle Murray. We're going to dive into some big matchups that are coming up this weekend. We're going to show you what those are all about. For those of you watching us live, we invite you to get involved in the chat and let us know what you'd like us to weigh in on. We're going to be hitting a bunch of different games from this weekend, recapping Thursday Night Football, looking ahead to the Sunday slate, of course, Sunday Night Football and Monday Night Football. So take a look at the games that are coming up this weekend on your screen. A reminder, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications on YouTube. Comment and like us as well. Still to come, we'll have 3 and Out, our best bet segment at the conclusion of the show. We'll get the bronze, silver, and gold picks from both Kyle and Taylor. We recommend you keep an eye on our official bet tracker, FTN Alerts, and of course, FTNBets.com. You can try a 3-day trial of FTN Daily at FTNDaily.com right now. We invite you to become an FTN Bets premium member today and save 10% when you sign up with the code FTN Wins. You can get access to our top analyst tools, picks, and more. And use the promo code FTN TV for 20% off any subscription. Visit FTNBets.com for more information. So you can see the slate that we're dealing with this weekend here for week 8 of the National Football League. Before we really dive into it, Kyle, I do want to start with you in regards to a quick reaction to what happened last night on Thursday Night Football on Prime Video. The Baltimore Ravens managed to put away the Tampa Bay Buccaneers on the road. The Bucs looked good in the first quarter. It looked like Brady and company had righted the proverbial ship, and then the Ravens really just pulled away with it late, getting back to their bread and butter. What are some of your takeaways from last night's win for the Ravens?
The takeaway for me is the health of some of these guys. It's a real bummer to see a lot of guys, quite frankly, that I have exposure to in best balls and fantasy stuff get injured, and obviously prop bets from last night. So hopefully those guys can stay healthy and get back to kind of where they were. But it was a good game, better than we've had in previous Thursdays, so can't complain there. Good to see that the Ravens finally actually not only took advantage of a lead, but held on to it until the game was finally over. So, hopefully the Buccaneers can get going. I've heard a lot of the divorce talk for Tom Brady. Hopefully we can quiet that at some point for Mr. Brady there. But, can't complain about the game.
Yeah, in regards to the game itself, Taylor, the Ravens late in the game got a lot of help from Duvernay, fabulous wide receiver that they had. Kenyon Drake had himself a phenomenal second half, but also Isaiah Likely really came on there at the end. Just projecting ahead, how likely is it that you're going to bet with Likely, maybe looking at future Baltimore games?
Well, I was actually pretty shocked that the Ravens were more pass heavy. I thought that they would really be more run heavy because that's what they've done all season. And then right in the first half of the entire game, my prop that I had was Lamar Jackson under 19.5 completions. He already hit that in the first half. I was expecting them to run the ball a lot more. I don't know if that was just because they were playing the Bucs that they decided to be a little bit more pass heavy. I don't know if that will continue moving forward. I just thought they would go a little bit more with their steady run game.
Yeah, there were some injuries on the defensive side for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming into that game. Maybe that influenced the decision-making there. But like I was saying, once the Ravens got back to their bread and butter, running the ball, play action pass, granted Mark Andrews did go out with an injury, but they did what they do best and it ultimately got them a win. In regards to Tom Brady's off-the-field problems at home, I can only imagine what he is dealing with and how he is possibly even attempting to focus on football when his family is probably his utmost concern. So not to be cynical, but for those of us that are betting on these games, I'd be very, very cautious because this just seems like a very unpredictable Tampa Bay Buccaneers team altogether, given that Tom Brady, the greatest quarterback who ever lived, is dealing with something so gargantuan. Let's focus once again on football. However, let's look ahead to this weekend. Some of the games that we're watching as we revisit the slate. One in particular I just found very interesting, Taylor, in regards to the Las Vegas Raiders at the New Orleans Saints. This is a rough weekend altogether in regards to losing football teams against losing football teams. We'll get to more on that in a second, but the Raiders are getting 1.5 on the road against the Saints. You've got the former Raiders head coach Dennis Allen, now the head coach of the New Orleans Saints, up against the new head coach of the Raiders, Josh McDaniels. There's a lot of familiarity here, And the Saints, especially in primetime last week, really got exposed. They're the worst in the National Football League, -10 in terms of turnovers. They are turning to Andy Dalton once again at quarterback. Do you like the Raiders going into New Orleans this weekend?
I actually like this spot more for the Saints. The Saints rolling with Andy Dalton at quarterback says something to me. If Jameis Winston is apparently healthy enough, why is he not starting? It makes me think that a lot of diehard New Orleans fans, I've heard just different things, that a lot of people thought that Andy Dalton had a really good preseason and he should have gotten the starting job. So maybe they think that they have a better chance to win with Andy Dalton at the helm instead of Jameis Winston. Also, the NFC South right now is completely wide open. So this could be a proving game for them. I mean, they're really only in technically second/last place, however you want to look at it. So there's a lot of ways that this could go. I think the Raiders, if you look at how Derek Carr has played as a road favorite, he's 0-6 against the spread over his last 6 games as a road favorite. And I normally don't go with betting trends, but because it's a betting show, this is one that I'm going to roll with. I don't think that the Raiders are going to play great in New Orleans this week.
One thing to reinforce that, Kyle, is that on the injury report for the Raiders, Devontae Adams, questionable. Darren Waller, questionable. Josh Jacobs, questionable. I think that last one's a really big one because Josh Jacobs over the last 3 games is 441 yards rushing and 6 touchdowns. It's one of the best stretches in a 3-game stint for any Raider running back. Do you share the concerns that Taylor has?
I do think that they'll come down a little bit from some of the offensive efficiency that they've had, especially on the ground. But I mean, Jacobs has been phenomenal, and that offensive line has been great as well. But yeah, definitely concerned with some of the injuries and potential kind of reports to monitor leading up to game time. It does sound like all of those guys, except for maybe Waller, will play. And I think that just having Adams and Jacobs alone is big enough for this team. But in terms of what we've seen from the New Orleans defense this year, it really hasn't been as kind of enticing as we've kind of come to expect from the New Orleans defense over the last couple of years. And now they're going to be without Marshawn Lattimore once again. So that's a big injury to monitor as well. You know, this New Orleans team's bottom 12 in both pass and rush DVOA this season, 18th in overall defensive efficiency. So very curious to see how New Orleans defense can hold up against an offense that has had success moving the ball, but not necessarily a ton of success scoring. Obviously, we saw it kind of all come to fruition, maybe some positive regression last week for Josh Jacobs and the Raiders. But that was also an elite matchup that they had last week. So I tend to agree on the potential kind of come to earth moment here for the Raiders. And I would still prefer the Raiders in this spot because I'm pretty worried about the New Orleans offense in general. They're also dealing with tons of injuries. Chris Olave has been fantastic, but with Thomas and Landry banged up, they're going to miss this game. Andy Dalton is the starter for this one, but if he throws 2 more pick sixes, we could quickly see them turn right back to Jameis Winston and or Taysom Hill. So that's another thing to monitor there. So this is a game that I'm very curious to kind of pay attention to the outcome here.
Yeah, and you can imagine Alvin Kamara going to continue to be a focal point, but Taysom Hill exploded pretty recently for the Saints, so maybe potentially revisiting that gadget. Let's shift our focus to the AFC East, where we'll actually have a winning team involved in this game, and oddly enough, it's the Jets. The Patriots are on the road at the Jets. The Patriots are 3-4, visiting the 5-2 Jets. The Patriots are getting -2.5 on the road. We're kind of sticking with this theme of road favorites. But Taylor, I don't feel good about this bet at all for the Patriots if you're going to take the points. Honestly, it feels like Vegas is daring you to take the Jets. But honestly, with the indecision at quarterback right now between Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones, and a lot of questions being thrown at Bill Belichick and Matt Patricia, how do you take the Patriots in this one?
Oh, I think that this matchup is really interesting. Historically, over the last 12 games, New England's won every single one. Not a single player on the Jets roster has ever played while this team has beat the New England Patriots. Jets quarterback Zach Wilson was a sophomore in high school the last time that they beat them. So that's crazy to really think about that some of these guys are that young. I think that right now we're seeing some good things out of the Jets. It's a new week. I think that bringing in running back James Robinson from Jacksonville to take over carries for the injured Breece Hall is going to be something to look at. And the Patriots are just really fading into the background. Nothing really sticks out about them to me anymore. I like the Jets in this spot, but I do worry that Vegas is trying to trap us in some kind of way just because the Jets are 5-2 makes us think we want to take them.
Kyle, do you think the trade for the aforementioned James Robinson is enough to make up for what Breece Hall is, his absence now? Because for us on this show, we love betting Breece Hall.
Definitely not. I think you would have to take a ton to acquire something that can fill the shoes of what Breece Hall was doing. It's one of those things where it's a bummer to see that injury happen because it's a young guy who was just looking so elite. He had the long touchdown last week before the injury. James Robinson, I think, is a good player in his own right. Also, returning from a fairly severe injury last year. And I think what we saw from Michael Carter last season was impressive enough to where they'll be fine, kind of turning over the keys to that offense there. But the rest of what we've seen from this Jets offense, it's been up and down, right? We saw a lot of pass volume in the first few weeks with Joe Flacco, and they essentially flipped that on its head when Zach Wilson's under center, turned into a more run-heavy offense. So how will that change here this week with no more Breece Hall? I think they'll still rely on Michael Carter quite a bit, and this Patriots defense against the run has been quite brutal. I don't think that we'll see James Robinson get extremely involved this week, kind of settling in, acclimating to the playbook. And I do think that Carter will still be the RB1 in this offense. So though I don't see any props up for Carter yet, but assuming that line comes in at a reasonable number, I would be looking at the over there. There's only 4 teams in the NFL allowing more yards per carry on the ground than the New England Patriots. But another pick that I like in this game is another prop, Garrett Wilson. I like both of his overs on both receptions and yards. 38.5 receiving yards is where I'm seeing his current prop, 3.5 catches at plus 100 for Garrett Wilson. No Corey Davis here in this spot. Corey Davis was effectively the wide receiver 1 over the last couple of weeks with Elijah Moore dealing with the trade request and being sidelined last week. I could potentially see some squeaky wheel narrative working out for Elijah Moore here, but I do think that Garrett Wilson will be the wide receiver 1 in this offense. Not a great matchup against New England, but I do think that these lines are low enough. 3.5 catches at plus 100 for Wilson and only 38.5 receiving yards. My model has him for over 4 catches and 51 receiving yards.
Mr. He don't miss for a reason. I definitely want to. I'm going to be paying attention to that game because I honestly think that's a game where the Jets can define their season. Granted, it's a home game, but if they can knock off the Patriots, who are sputtering a little bit right now, this could really build something positive for them, considering they're sitting pretty at 5-2 right now. I do want to involve right now in the chat, one of our good buddies, Chris Meany, who is sitting out today, is chiming in a little bit about the World Series, as a matter of fact, which gets underway tonight. Harper versus Altuve behind Taylor. Taylor, very nice touch with your set there. So, Taylor, who do you think wins the World Series, and why is it the Philadelphia Phillies?
I wish it was going to be the Philadelphia Phillies with all of my heart. I understand wanting the underdog to win. I'm a Cubs fan, so I understand the pain, but the Astros are going to win it. Honestly, I think in 5 or 6. They just have the better ball club. It's unfortunately the facts when you just look at it on paper. By some magical way, everybody's like, Philadelphia's on a tear. If you really look at it, the Astros haven't lost a single game in the postseason, so they're on a bigger tear than the Philadelphia Phillies are. So I got to go with the Astros.
I'm dancing on my own, I think. But the positive thing is that Justin Verlander has never won a game as a starter in the World Series since ever. I think it was 2009. He did win his first postseason game since 2019 this year. So I'm hoping at least that helps for game 1 tonight. So
Yeah,
we'll
game
see.
1.
Yeah, exactly. George saying it's in the chat, Philly season. Let's put the trash cans away. Yeah, I'm completely with you, George. Okay, let's get back to football. Thank you, George, so much. Appreciate that. Another game that we're keeping our eyes on, and again, it's a road favorite. San Francisco 49ers taking on the LA Rams. The 49ers are getting -1.5, and this is another game that is between 2 losing football teams. The 49ers 3-4, the Rams 3-3. There's just something about this game, Kyle, that the 49ers, this makes a lot of sense because they seem to have been rejuvenated. The trade for Christian McCaffrey has really changed the way this offense looks, the way this offense operates, and granted, it's a limited sample size, but what do you think about the 49ers' chances against the Rams?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to really not feel great about the 49ers just because of the fact that their defense looks so elite. I will say I do have some positive prospects for this Rams offense to potentially get some solid form. The thing is, it's going to be difficult to fix an offensive line over a bye week, but in terms of getting a week of being able to get healthy, work on that offense for another week, I do think that'll help the Rams offense. We've seen plenty of times over the past few years where teams come out of the bye week looking much improved. I do like that for the Rams. I think this line is still a little bit shaky here. I would prefer the 49ers -1. Obviously, Deebo Samuel has been ruled out for this game, so I'm not seeing a ton of props or at least updated props. But one thing that I'm counting on is McCaffrey being heavily involved in the offense. Another week to learn that playbook. I have no doubts that Shanahan's going to want to use his new shiny toy there. 61.5 rushing yards is what I'm seeing. I would prefer the over on that number, even 34.5 receiving yards. We just saw McCaffrey play this Rams team. I think it was 2 or 3 weeks ago. He was on the Panthers back then, but still a solid week there for McCaffrey, where he went for, I think it was 13 carries, 69 yards, 7 grabs for 89 yards. So obviously things are going to change with the scheme, but I would like McCaffrey's over on both of those numbers as he gets more acclimated in the offense.
Taylor, in regards to what Matt Stafford and company have to do on offense, Kyle was just talking about that defense. The pass rush, obviously, from the 49ers is outstanding. That front seven continues to be spectacular. What do you expect to see be the game plan for Matt Stafford, and how do they attack this defense?
Oh, I don't really know if they can. I think outright the 49ers will win, and Kyle Shanahan's just better against Sean McVay in the regular season, 9-0 over their last 9 matchups. So I like the 49ers in this spot. Matt Stafford, I mean, he's got to go back to what he was doing last season. In a way, I don't want to say I'm bored of these two teams, but the NFC West just isn't what it was last year, at least through these first 8 weeks. And I feel like this matchup between the 49ers and the Rams is just very repetitive at this point. We're not seeing a lot of differences in these two squads beside the addition of Christian McCaffrey, which I was also going to say there are not a lot of props out, and I like his overs as well. Same with Kyle. That's really about all that you can go with right now at this point.
It was really amazing. I was expecting to see Christian McCaffrey kind of steadily introduced into the offense, and it was nope. It was kind of 0 to 60. The value of Jeff Wilson Sr. has really dropped off a cliff, and that's nothing that has to do with anything that he's doing. He's an excellent complementary back, and for whatever we know about Christian McCaffrey, tends to be a bit injury prone. So if you're playing fantasy or if you're looking down the long track, so to speak, keep an eye on Jeff Wilson. But it seems like it's boom or bust with Christian McCaffrey, especially with the aforementioned Deebo Samuel out of the game. There are a lot of losing teams playing football this week, but as a matter of fact, there's only one game this entire weekend that is taking place between 2 winning teams. It's the Giants at the Seahawks. The Giants are astonishingly 6-1. Taylor, I know you share that fascination that I do. And then at the same time, the Seahawks are 4-3. The Seahawks are getting -3 at home. Taylor, I'll start with you because you and I are both, NFC East people. You a Cowboys fan, me an Eagles fan. How in the world are the Giants 6-1?
I hate to say it as a Cowboys fan, but the Giants look good, 6-1. I mean, they're a good football team at this point, and I actually like them as my underdog to win outright this week against the Seattle Seahawks. I think that their X factor is really just head coach Brian Daboll. He figures out the weaknesses in these defenses and exactly how to exploit them. They're the best team in fumbles right now in the entire NFL. And then when it comes to their offense, they don't have much going on in the passing game. They don't have a ton of weapons to deal with. So they lean on Saquon Barkley in the run game, and it happens to work out for them. And this week against the Seahawks, they don't have a stellar run defense. They have the most rushing yards allowed out of any team in the entire league. So I like the Giants in this spot to possibly go 7-1, which I cannot believe that I'm saying.
It's really mind-blowing. And who would have thought a trade of Kadarius Toney would mean absolutely nothing to the New York Giants in 2022? Kyle, when you look at this game, the Seahawks, at the same time, the fascination with how the Giants are doing, I'm really amazed that the Seahawks team is at 4-3. Geno Smith has been playing very solid football. And I think a lot of people saw that opening victory against the Denver Broncos and Russell Wilson as kind of an eye-opening game. Maybe the Seahawks have something. Potentially it was a fluke. Now we kind of know what the Broncos are, but the Seahawks have maintained their consistency. Kenneth Walker from Michigan State has really been a nice addition in facilitating the running game with Rashad Penny going out. What do you like about this Seahawks attack?
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what this offense looks like come game time with both Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf questionable with injuries. It seems like it might be a bit of a longer shot for Metcalf to play, but he does have a chance. But that's just me trying to gain some perspective based on reading reports from beat writers. Really, I don't know much about the situation and couldn't really, garner a guess there. But in terms of what I like from a prop betting perspective, Saquon Barkley, 81.5 yards. I like the over on that. The Seattle Seahawks team allowing over 108 yards on the ground to opposing running backs so far this season. As Taylor said, he's been heavily involved. There's no doubt about it. He's kind of like him and Daniel Jones really on the ground. Daniel Jones has been very impressive how he's been able to move the ball on the ground as well. And this team is kind of living and dying by these two here. I do think Wan'Dale Robinson also will be heavily involved in the passing game. We saw him get banged up a little bit last week, but prior to that, he was being targeted heavily. So I wouldn't mind taking a look at some of his props as well. 41.5 receiving yards is where his line currently is on DraftKings. But in terms of an official bet that I have in the bet tracker, Saquon Barkley over 81.5.
And to your point about Daniel Jones, I would put him in terms of maybe one of the top 4 running quarterbacks in the National Football League right now. Obviously, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray jump to mind, Josh Allen jumps to mind, and Daniel Jones can be right in that conversation given the opportunities because he's athletic enough to get away and he's athletic enough to make some plays with his legs. But is it enough to beat Seattle on the road? We will find out. So that is a lot of the games going on during the day on Sunday. Let's turn our attention to Sunday Night Football. And here we get one of the elite teams, especially in the AFC, the Buffalo Bills, hosting a team that is absolutely struggling right now from the NFC in the Green Bay Packers. Aaron Rodgers and company are 3-4. The Bills are 5-1. The Bills are getting a whopping 10.5 at home. And I really like that bet. I really like that spread. I like taking the points for the Bills. Kyle, when you look at this matchup, do the Packers have any chance of really keeping up with the Bills in terms of scoring?
When I see the Packers struggling, like part of me just wants to think back to a couple of years ago when he spelled out the word relax for us, and then they turned out to be perfectly fine. And it just doesn't feel like they have that in their range of outcomes this year. They've just continued to struggle. And obviously last week was kind of like the final straw where it's like, all right, they're just never going to turn it around. They're never going to get it done. Aaron Rodgers comes out today and says that there's a lot of guys making mistakes. He was on the Pat McAfee show on Tuesday, as he is, I think, every Tuesday, saying that people are just making mistakes at it. He had like numbers for how often, I don't know what defines a mistake for him, but he doesn't like how his team's been performing. And then today he comes out and says, maybe it's time to give some players who haven't been getting playing time. Yeah. So it's I would be very cautious with a lot of these fringe player type props, guys like Romeo Doubs. I know Allen Lazard's doubtful here, but I'd be very cautious with some of these guys and their props. But one guy I'm very confident in that will not be taken off the field is Aaron Jones. This guy is their kind of workhorse guy is what we've sort of come to see. Even with A.J. Dillon being a name that everyone likes to talk about, Aaron Jones was there last week, 2 receiving touchdowns when Aaron Rodgers needed him the most. 31.5 receiving yards is where his prop is. I'm taking the over there, over 31.5.
On the other side, Taylor, this Bills offense just seems like they're going to pick up right where they've left off every single time they step out on the field. They're coming off a bye week. Stephon Diggs has just been phenomenal this season. I believe he's the number 1 fantasy wide receiver for those that play fantasy. What do you think from the Bills in this game?
Well, I have a couple bets that I like, but first I have to say, dare I say it, I think it's time for the older generation of these quarterbacks like Green Bay's Aaron Rodgers to possibly hang up their cleats and start welcoming in some of these new guys like Buffalo's Josh Allen into the NFL elite quarterbacks. One thing that we have going right now is the Green Bay Packers, though, have the longest running active streak of wins in prime time. I think it's time for that to be broke. Right now it's sitting at 13. I think the Bills are going to break that cycle here. The Bills have the best offense in the entire league. And the Packers are just subpar in every single category. From a betting perspective, I would look to Buffalo's receiver Gabe Davis to go over his total of 57.5 yards. Stephon Diggs is the wideout one, but Davis is getting more favorable matchup here this week with Packers quarterback Eric Stokes, and Allen will definitely throw him a couple of long balls Davis's way. So I really like that as a prop. I also like Aaron Rodgers under 1.5 touchdowns. The Bills have only allowed 5 passing touchdowns through the first 6 games. And if Green Bay's receiver Allen Lazard sits, that's Rodgers' favorite end zone target. I like him for under 1.5 passing touchdowns.
And based on the Pat McAfee show, the word favorite is doing a lot of heavy lifting there for Mr. Aaron Rodgers. From Sunday Night Football to Monday Night Football, it's the Battle of Ohio. The Cincinnati Bengals are getting -3 on the road against the Cleveland Browns. The Bengals are 4-3. The Browns are 2-5. The thing that might be playing in the Browns' favor here, Taylor, is defense getting to Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow is going to be without Jamar Chase for the next 4 to 6 weeks. That is a huge blow to this receiving core. We know how this offensive line for Cincinnati has struggled this season. Yet Myles Garrett and company haven't exactly looked like that vaunted front four and front seven that the Browns have had in the past. What do you think of this matchup, particularly for the Bengals offense against the Browns defense?
Well, I think that the NFL possibly has the worst history of primetime games that we have ever seen. The
bad.
Browns are on a 4-game skid right now. And even with Cincy missing their top target in Jamar Chase, I don't see this as being a problem for them handling the Browns. Cleveland's side of the ball, I'm going to take running back Nick Chubb over his rushing total, whatever that may be. The last time I checked, they hadn't decided on a number for that, but that's just always a solid bet every single week. He's the league leading rusher. And if they're going to ship off running back to Kareem Hunt, it's likely that he's going to get even more favorable looks and more favorable carries to head in Chubb's way. The Bengals side of the ball, I think that you should take the over on running back Joe Mixon receptions. I don't know what that's going to be either because they haven't set the line for that as well. I'm not really sure. Probably just because it's Monday. A lot of these props are not set yet. But I like Mixon for over his receptions because he hasn't gotten going too well in his run game. He's been pretty stagnant, but when it's come to check down passes, they've been there.
Kyle, of the information that's out there and available for the Cleveland Browns offense heading into this game against the Bengals defense, is there anybody that jumps out to you other than Nick Chubb?
Yeah, Nick Chubb's definitely someone that stands out. You know, I called the line out for him last week. It's just disrespectful. I mean, this guy's been continuously going over 100 yards, and his line came in at 71.5. I doubt it'll be that low this week, but if it is, I would definitely be interested in that one once again. Joe Mixon's rushing line is also one that I would be interested in. I do think that with Jamar Chase sidelined, they might turn to the run a little bit more, and this Cleveland defense has been terrible against the run. We saw the Baltimore Ravens pick on them last week. They pretty much turned away from the passing game to focus on that run game. That is kind of how bad the Cleveland rushing defense has been so far this season. Again, no props up, as Taylor mentioned. I think with the combination of it being a Monday night game and Jamar Chase injury kind of affecting some things here, do want to see where Tyler Boyd's line comes in at, and as well as T. Higgins. I currently have T. Higgins projected for about 80 receiving yards and Tyler Boyd for about 59 receiving yards. So I'll be monitoring those two as well. But I guess the key prop for me, and again, no lines yet, but it would be Joe Mixon's rushing yards. I have him for over 70 on the ground here, so it'll be interesting to see where Vegas comes in with his rushing prop.
Yeah, for those of you that are watching this after we've recorded it, please do your homework as best you can and bet safely in the Battle of Ohio. That's going to be interesting on Monday Night Football. It is now time for 3 and Out, our best bet segment. We have our bronze, silver, and gold picks from our fantastic analysts and Kyle Murray and Taylor Mathis. Taylor, I want to start with you in regards to bronze. We've been talking a lot about running backs, and that's exactly where your bronze pick lands.
Yeah, bronze pick is going to be in the Broncos Jags game. Both of these teams are hobbling into London this Sunday with 2-5 records. Denver's QB, Russell Wilson, is good to go for Sunday. So I guess those high knees on the plane clearly worked. They're saying that he's going to be playing.
I was waiting for you to say something. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm like, well, is that good news for Denver or not? I'm really not sure, and I don't even really know if it matters at this point. Jacksonville trading for running back James Robinson to the Jets Monday to take over for Breece Hall, as we talked about earlier. This sets Jags running back Travis Etienne. I want to be honest.
ETN.
But I got to already say this. I actually watched him before I came on and did this. His way of pronouncing his last name is not Etienne. He says HTN because he says in the New Orleans Cajun area, you pronounce it with an H. So he says everybody gets it wrong. So I'm like,
we'll all be corrected, I hope, very soon.
But just so everybody knows, I'm going to go with, I'll say ETN, but I think he says it as HTN to have a massive game this week. And I'm going to go with over 69.5 rushing. ETN slow to start the season, averaging just 32 yards throughout the first 4. Last 3 weeks, though, over this number in 3 straight, averaging 90 on the ground. Before, ETN was sharing snaps with Robinson. Now that's not going to be the case. We saw the momentum shifting into ETN's favor last week with touches. Jags QB Trevor Lawrence and ETN also have a lot of chemistry. They played together at Clemson. ETN often is used as a receiving back as well. And ETN ranked second on the team at Clemson in receptions when Lawrence was at QB. So I'm going to go with him for over on his prop for this one. Big roll this week, over 69.5 rushing yards.
Take the running back who's listed as number 1 for the Jaguars, whose first name is Travis, and figure out the pronunciation later. Also is a good note. Keeping on the bronze picks, Kyle, you like wide receiver DeAndre Hopkins from the Arizona Cardinals. Why?
Yeah, I mean, he came out firing after his lengthy suspension, and he did return from that absence to a measly 48% target share. He accounted for 48% of the team's targets. Kyler dropped back 29 times. Threw it Hopkins' way 14 different times. His line this week comes in at 67.5 receiving yards. I like him to go well over that. I am for north of 90 receiving yards this week. Like I mentioned, that volume along with this potential game environment in this Minnesota and Arizona game, I think is going to be a bountiful one. The Vikings ranked 21st against the pass so far this season, and both teams in this game are playing at a top 6 adjusted pace so far. So I should set up for a fast and a friendly game environment from an offensive production standpoint. Like I mentioned, the volume is going to be there for Hopkins. He turned 14 targets into 10 catches for 103 yards. And this line coming in here at 67.5, I think is just simply too low, especially at minus 115. So D-Hop over 67.5 receiving yards is my bronze play.
I like that a lot, considering some of the struggles that the Cardinals have had as of late. I fully expect Kyler Murray to be leaning on Hopkins even more than 40%, which is pretty astonishing. Turning our attention to silver picks, Taylor, I know you and I are always butting heads between the Eagles and the Cowboys, and luckily the Eagles beat the Cowboys 2 weeks ago, the last time we did this show together, and I was really happy about that. But you are focusing in on the Cowboys here for your silver pick.
Yeah, silver pick in the Bears-Cowboys games. My hometown team, Chicago, against Dallas, the squad that I am a team of. So I am excited for this game. I have a little bit of my own personal interest in it as well. Chicago's coming off their biggest win of the season, beating the Pats in Foxborough for the first time in franchise history. Sorry, Bears fans. I know that you're excited, but that does not mean that you're going to win the Super Bowl now or that you're going to beat the Cowboys this week. So my silver pick, though, is kind of playing in favor of backing the Bears' strengths. I'm taking Dallas's QB, Dak Prescott, under 31.5 passing attempts. Prescott's first game back last week since his thumb injury he sustained in week 1. He took on the Lions, who have an awful pass defense, only 25 passing attempts. Bears pass defense best in the league. Opponents have the fewest completions against Chicago, and they allow pass plays 48% of the time. That's also the fewest in the league. So they rank first in both of those categories. The Bears investing in their secondary has really paid off for them. Safeties Eddie Jackson and Jaquan Brisker total for 2 sacks and 4 interceptions. The duo just really gets after the passer, and they lock down those pass catchers. So it's hard to have an explosive pass game with a defense like the Bears. So I'm going to go with Prescott over 31.5 pass attempts for my silver pick this week.
I like that a lot, and especially in regards to Bears safety Jaquan Brisker. He's a Penn State grad. I'm a Penn State grad. Big fan of Jaquan Brisker, so I completely agree with yours. But all kidding aside, Jackson and Brisker is quickly developing into one of the best safety tandems in all of football, and Brisker is a rookie. It's pretty astonishing. From a Penn State safety to an Alabama running back here, Kyle, your silver pick.
Yeah, we've rang this bell quite a bit on this show. Derrick Henry over 11.5 receiving yards. It's been mine and Meanie's one of our staples this year, and I'm going right back to it. Even though he failed to go over this number last week, he had 3 catches for 10 yards. If I was a betting man, which I clearly am, I would bet that if Derrick Henry goes out and grabs 3 balls through the air, I would be willing to bet that he's going to go over this number fairly easily. So I would say last week was a little bit of a bad variance type outcome there. But outside of that game, he racked up 3 straight performances with 30-plus receiving yards or more. And while he did have just 10 last week, those 3 catches leads us to a continued increased involvement for Henry in the passing game. Over the last 3 weeks, he has a 15% target share. And now over the course of the season, he has a career high 12% target share on the year. So it's a very clear offensive shift in this Titans offense. They're getting Henry the ball more out of the backfield through the air. This is a play where it could potentially be a 1-play payday type deal where Derrick Henry grabs 1 screen for 15 or so yards and we call it a day. But again, the consistent involvement has been there for Henry, who's averaging 4 targets per game over his last 4 weeks. So Derrick Henry over 11.5 receiving yards is going to be the play, not to mention a very good matchup against a soft Houston defense. There might be a scenario where we're expecting Derrick Henry to be kind of involved extremely heavily on the ground, but even in games where over the past few weeks, he's been heavily involved in the ground, racking up 100+ yards in 3 of his last 4 weeks. He's still been heavily involved in the passing game as well. Like we mentioned, he went over 100 yards last week, had three grabs in that one. So he's been the heartbeat of this offense, involved on both the ground and through the air. So I like Derrick Henry over 11.5 receiving yards today.
It's such a low threshold. I agree with you. You really do have to consider that. Moving on to the gold pick. Speaking of receptions, Taylor, you're focusing on a wide receiver for your gold pick.
Gold pick, Miami at Detroit. The Dolphins had a nice step back into the win column after beating the Steelers in week 7. Quarterback Tua Tagovailoa making his return last week. And when this Miami team is at its best, it's when he is on the field and that pass offense is firing on all cylinders. Take wideout Tyreek Hill over 86.5 receiving yards. This is hit in 4 out of his 7 games. He's first in the league with 773 receiving yards and 73 targets. Miami passes 64% of the time. Detroit's secondary doesn't have the speed to match up with Hill. Gold pick is going to be Hill over 96.5 receiving yards. I think this Dolphins offense has a really big chance to get it right here this week against the Lions.
Yeah, very easy to be consistent in regards to betting on the Miami passing attack. In keeping with our final gold pick here, Kyle is sticking to running backs. Who do you like, Kyle?
Yeah, real quick before we get to my pick, shout out to George for that graphic of that Tyreek Hill play. That was a
I know, right?
Yeah, that's a I wish
really
I had
cool.
the skills.
It's
to create
terrifying.
that.
He looks like a stormtrooper or something out of Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, how does that bet not hit now with that graphic?
I agree.
But for my gold pick, I'm going to do a little bit of a heat check here. We're going with a plus 430 long shot, and I'm sure Taylor will like this one. Tony Pollard, 2+ touchdowns in this one against the Chicago Bears. Bears defense has been weak against the run, and more interestingly enough is this Dallas offense and the way that they're utilizing these running backs over the course of the year. No other running back, no other player has had a touch inside the 5 here for the Dallas Cowboys. It's been Zeke and it's been Tony Pollard. Zeke's out of the equation this week. He's doubtful. He's not going to play in this one. Tony Pollard is going to be the guy in the red zone. He's going to be the guy everywhere. I like his chances to find the end zone, not only once, but twice here. Last week we saw Zeke get banged up in the middle of the game. Tony Pollard went on to play 65% of snaps, the season high. I'm expecting close to 90 to 95% of snaps here for Tony Pollard. They have Malik Davis behind him, the depth chart. No other running back has played more than 3% of snaps for this Dallas offense. I think that they're just waiting to give this opportunity to Tony Pollard, and now they're going to take advantage of that. He's going to be heavily involved, like I mentioned, in the red zone, outside of the red zone. I think he finds the end zone twice here, plus 430.
Long term, Taylor, obviously you're a Cowboys fan. I mean, obviously there's an injury to Zeke right now, but is this the beginning of the end for Zeke in Dallas?
That's a really good question. I want to go with no, mostly because we know how Jerry Jones operates. He's just very loyal to the guys that he likes. So it could even be Tony Pollard over the past couple of years has really proved to be the better running back in my eyes, but they really love to go to Zeke for that short yardage because he's more of a power back. So I guess in that sense, I think that Zeke will stick around. I think that Tony Pollard's the better option at running back for running back 1, but I don't know if it'll go that way just because of Jerry Jones.
Yeah, he does those favorites, and he tends to give them very long, very lucrative contracts. So
lots of chances.
Not the worst boss to have in the grand scheme of things, I suppose. I want to thank you all so much for joining us here, and hopefully we've given you a lot of good information regarding week 8 of the NFL schedule. And as we were talking about, a lot of the lines at the time we're recording this for Monday Night Football have not been set, and not a lot of the props have been set yet. So please take what you can from this video, and we hope you have some very, very good and prosperous bets this weekend. He is Mr. He Don't Miss, Kyle Murray. Check him out at AKMur DFS, and she is Miss She Don't Miss, Taylor Mathis.
Hey, I'm like the fade queen right now. I can't hit a prop to save my life, so maybe don't listen to me.
At Team Matt Sports on social media. For Taylor Mathis and Kyle Murray, I'm Tom Hannifan. Join us next Friday at about 5 p.m. Eastern time here on our YouTube channel for the next edition of the FTN Bets NFL Betting Show. Have a good weekend, everybody.